And it's Ken Kreitzer for CaMMVetsMedia. We're at West Point, actually in the Hall of Fame area in the in Yankee in Mikey Stadium. We're going to be at Yankee Stadium this week. It's Notre Dame week, and a special 7 o'clock game at Yankee Stadium against Notre Dame. And so we're going to talk all about it. Really, an extra element of excitement about this. It's a lot like an Army Navy game week. So let's welcome our crew. We've got in Florida calling in Richard Miller. Richard, how are you?
Very well, Ken. Looking. I've had this game circled on the schedule all year, and now it's finally here. I know it's not a bowl game, but it really feels like a bowl game. It feels like a playoff game in a way.
Well, it does. It's special. Thank you. We've got Jack McGurk calling in from Pelham with a famous background.
Hey, happy to be here. Excited for some Army Irish football. Army's biggest test of the season yet.
No doubt, no doubt. And calling in from Long Island, we've got Chuck Donegan, who's going to be reporting from the sideline at Yankee Stadium on Saturday night. Chuck, how are you?
Good, Ken. Definitely psyched for what's ahead this weekend. I'm sure it's going to be one for the ages.
Yeah, hopefully, some of the Army Notre Dame games really were famous.
Yeah.
And calling in from the Beat Navy studio in Huntsville, Alabama, which is being renamed Beat Notre Dame studio for this week, Colonel Sam Houston.
Hey, I had to give a shout out to the Army sprint team once again, my old team. They have completed a historic season, 8-0. They just beat Navy for the second time to win the College Sprint Football League championship. So many kudos to Mark West, his staff, and the entire team on an outstanding season. They got the star, they got the championship, and they got the undefeated season. Way to go.
That's great. It's always good to hear that Army's able to beat Navy in sprint football. Now, we've got a big one on Saturday night. Undefeated Army, West Point, number 16 in the country in some of the polls. The top rated rushing offense in the country, and one of the top, and the top number two team in team defense. One team passed them by this week by a fraction of a point, and it's the Army defense. It's going to be an interesting matchup. It's on national television on NBC on Notre Dame's series. It's a Shamrock series, so Notre Dame's going to wear special uniforms for the game, and hopefully it'll be the weather like we had. I think it was 14 years ago when Army played Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium previously, the first college football game in the new stadium, and it was just a spectacular night weather-wise and the scene. This one is a Notre Dame home game, so Army alumnus like Colonel Houston have been scrambling around to get a ticket. Um, and we're going to have a couple of us at the game. Looking forward to it. Um, it's special for me in that my uncle, Warren Kreitzer, who was attended West Point and went into the Army World War II with my father from the National Guard and commissioned in with my dad at Fort Sill in 1942. He came back from the invasion of Europe to be at Yankee Stadium in the fall of 1945 for the Army Notre Dame game that year, among 75,000 people in the old stadium. I was trying to figure out how they got 75,000 people in the place back then. But they did a lot of standing room, I'm sure. And what a thought. Colonel, what do you think it would have been like for someone who'd gone to West Point, an Army officer, fought his way across Europe from Normandy, ended up liberating a Polish POW camp, and to be back in the Bronx, his hometown, at Yankee Stadium, uh, to see his team play Notre Dame, it must have been a sense of triumph for someone like that, like my uncle.
Yeah, I mean it had to have been a life in a full circle. Um, you were young, you were commissioned, you went off to war, You managed to survive. You brought as many of your comrades back as you could, and you accomplished your mission. And all of the things that you experienced and saw, you have internalized, and you are back home on your home soil. And your full circle is to be back to see your alma mater play a big football game, and be hailed as a hero, on the sideline in the stands for everything that you've done, while at the same time your team is out there still playing for the Army and still representing and still dominating on the field. So it had to have been an incredible feeling.
Yeah, and it turned out my father-in-law was there. He was about 11 or 12 years old. He had a ticket, was sitting out in the bleachers. He got a chance to be at the game. So it's some family significance in this. What is this like for you as a West Point grad, Colonel?
Well, you mean specifically Army playing Notre Dame and the
Yeah.
Yankee Stadium and the Shamrock Classic? First off, for the viewers, if you pay attention to the history of Army football and Army and Notre Dame, there are two things that you are probably aware of. First is that the worst shellacking Notre Dame ever took in its long and storied history, like the worst loss Notre Dame ever took, was to the 1945 Army football team. I believe it was the 44 or the 45 Army football team. Just stomped.
44.
Just absolutely stomped Notre Dame. And I don't even remember what the score was, but it was embarrassing. Second, the last time Army defeated Notre Dame was also the last time the two teams played when they were both ranked. And that was in 1958, when Army finished third in the national polling and had an undefeated season, 9-0-1, and had Pete Dawkins as their last Heisman Trophy winner. Army has not beaten Notre Dame since. And I was at the last Shamrock Classic Army Notre Dame game, and that was in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome in 2016. And, Army was having a breakout year. They had stumbled a little bit at midseason. Navy had already beaten Notre Dame that year because Navy was having a great year, even though they went on to lose to Army, of course. But when Army played Notre Dame in the Shamrock Classic, it was a slaughter. The 6 points that Army ended up scoring in the fourth quarter was gratuitous on the part of the Notre Dame third string. So it was not a good game at all. And so certainly old grad fans like myself, we remember things like that. And we also know that in the modern era, Army has not fared well against Notre Dame. The last time Army and Notre Dame played a really competitive game was in 1995. That was the Ronnie Makeda. It was not the 96 year. The 96 year was the year that Army finished ranked and lost to Auburn in the Independence Bowl and went, I think, 10-2 on the season. But the year before that, I believe Army finished at, 5-6. But they were in every single game they played. I think the combined score total of the games they lost was maybe 30 points. They were literally less than a score out from winning every game they played that year. And Notre Dame was one of those games. And I think they played at the Meadowlands. And Notre Dame jumped out to an early lead. Army stormed back in the second half. And with less than a minute to go, Army scored a touchdown. And rather than going for a tie with a 1 point and taking it into overtime, Army went for 2 points in the win. And they had Army had an outstanding tight end named Ron Lashinsky. And he ran a perfect route on the goal line. Ronnie Makeda hit him in stride, and Notre Dame had like a 180-pound cornerback, and he was 180 pounds soaking wet. He had to have the absolute perfect leverage and angle in order to stop 230-pound Ron Lashinsky at the goal line, and he did. And Notre Dame survived to win the game by 1 point. That's the last time Army and Notre Dame have had a competitive game.
Yeah, I was at that game. I took my father to it, and Yeah, Army scored 21 points in I think it was in the fourth quarter
They did. They came storming back, and
to get within one.
led by the quarterback that I continually compare Bryson Daly to, Ronnie Makeda.
Okay.
And so this is something that I think harkens well for this time around. It doesn't bode well that Jeff Monken, in his press interview, he stated very emphatically that he believes that this year's Notre Dame team is better than the Notre Dame team they had to face in 2016. But I will submit to you that the Army team that's going into this game is way better than the 2016 Army team, which was still trying to find its way through its first winning season in forever. So I don't think this year's team is intimidated by the idea of going to play Notre Dame. The 2016 team, you could tell they were intimidated. There was a fear factor going on there.
Well, I think, yeah, Elijah St. Hilaire was one of my favorite Army players, and he was kind of a hustle player. I noticed him in a summer scrimmage making plays, and so we followed his year, and he became the kick returner for the team, and so he returned kicks against Notre Dame, and I always ask him about it, and when I introduce him to people, I'll say, he returned kicks against Notre Dame, and it was kind of a career highlight. But he said, he could still feel the hits from taking the tackles on the kick returns.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
I'll bet.
Good guy. He's having a nice business career now in New York City. But yeah, it's the game in '95 at the Meadowlands in Southern. We were actually sitting up in the upper deck in the corner, right above where the end zone is for that, where that play happened. And they called it the $7 million tackle because if Army had won the game, Notre Dame wasn't going to a bowl game and would have lost that paycheck. And,
Yep.
But it was a great game the way Army came back on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this year, and it's going to be interesting. I asked Coach Monken a little bit today in the press conference. He was doing his best to sell that Notre Dame's the best team in the country, and he did a pretty good job of it. But I asked him a little bit about Riley Leonard, the Notre Dame quarterback, who is having a phenomenal season, completes 65% of his passes, 1,789 yards, 12 touchdowns passing, does have 4 interceptions. And that may be something that Army may be able to take advantage of. But he also runs the ball. He's the second leading ground gainer for the team, 641 yards, gained 6 yards a carry, 13 touchdowns rushing. It's quite a bit. And their other big back is Jeremiah Love, who has 720 yards, 6.3 per attempt, 12 touchdowns. He's also caught 18 balls, an average of 9 per catch. And Notre Dame's got a lot of receivers with 10, who have got above 10 catches. Mitchell Evans got 22. Bo Collins has got 30. Chris Mitchell 15, 18 by Jeremiah Love, as I said. So this is a pretty good offense that Army is going to be facing on Saturday. What do you think it's going to take to stop that, Sam?
First, I'll say, straight up, Notre Dame they have a very balanced offense. They play very consistently. They do ball control very well. They don't turn over the ball often. And they grind you. They're not known for the long ball passing, although they do have that in their arsenal. They're more of the 5-yard gains, sideline pass, kind of a team that'll consistently wear you down and drive the ball down the field and take time off the clock. And the fact that they don't make many mistakes is what makes them very difficult to defend. And their offensive line is, very comparable to Army's in size and in the level with which they play the game. So for defense, right when we were starting, I was actually writing some notes down because I didn't want to forget, some of my points. The defensive game plan against Notre Dame it's going to be pretty much the same defensive game plan that Army has every game, which is the beauty of Army's laser focus on one game at a time. First, Army has got to stop the run. And Notre Dame is probably going to be the most difficult team they've played yet to be able to stop their running game because of the level of play of their offensive line. That being said, as they're in the process of stopping the run, Army's defense can bend but don't break. They've got to look for opportunities to force turnovers. They need to have at least 2 or 3 and outs in this game. They have got to get Notre Dame's offense off the field. At least 2 or 3 and outs they've got to force in this game. Once they stop the run, they have got to put consistent pressure on that quarterback. They've got to spy the quarterback because, as you pointed out, he can run pretty well. He's got great vision. He's got good touch on his passes. He can find an open receiver when he's being harassed. And, Army has really got to have its A game. And they've got, people who are in coverage need to pay attention to their assigned coverage before they break coverage when they see the quarterback scrambling, because if he's not beyond the line of scrimmage, he's still got the option to throw it to somebody. And if you break coverage, your guy is now open. And that leads into my next little point, which is no busted coverages. The last time I saw busted coverage by Army was against Temple. And we remember that, everything but the kitchen sink blitz they pulled on the Temple quarterback, and they'd left the tight end completely uncovered, and he went 50 some yards for a touchdown. That's a busted coverage. They can't have that against Notre Dame. And they need to limit penalties, especially on third down. If you've got them on third down, don't have a great third down play on defense nullified by a penalty. Get those guys off the field. If they can do that consistently, they can take Notre Dame's offense to task in this game. And I think they can. I really think that they can do it.
Okay. Well, it's going to be quite a challenge. When you look at the Notre Dame offense, they're, as I said, Riley Leonard completes about 64% of his passes, 199 yards a game, and they rush for 216 yards a game, and very strong offense. And they don't make many mistakes. They don't have many turnovers, and that's what we saw. The one game I saw them in person was against Navy, and Chuck and I were at the Meadowlands for that one, and they were just very smooth, operate their offense, and their defense put lots of pressure on the Navy quarterback and ball handlers and generated 5 turnovers, which is all they needed for a pretty smooth win.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go around, and Richard. So what else happened last week in college football? What were 5 big games that you followed?
Let's see, five big games that I followed in college football from last week were as we're going to last week's games. They were let's see if we can. Oh yeah, come on. Can we get it up there? Let's see. Okay, 5 big games. Number 20 Clemson defeated Pittsburgh 24-20. Let's see. Number 2 Ohio State defeated Northwestern 31-7. You also have number 3 Texas defeating Arkansas 20-10. Colorado 49. Number 17 Colorado 49-24 over Utah. You also have, let's see, Temple defeating FAU 18-15. FAU has fallen now to 2-8. And also another game on here. Let's see. You have what's another? Oh, number 4 Penn State 49-10 over Purdue as they are making a case to still staying in the college football rankings. The college football playoff rankings. Speaking of the college football playoff rankings, they are out as of tonight. If I may
Yeah, go
if I
ahead.
may
That's a good point.
share those. The college football rankings the college football rankings were revealed as of tonight. Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2, Texas number 3, Penn State number 4. Those are the 4 buys. Rounding out 5 through 12, the Indiana Hoosiers, 10-0, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, whose Army is coming up playing Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, the Georgia Bulldogs, Tennessee, and Boise State have rounded out the the 12 teams in the college football playoff.
Okay, Richard, I want you to look up Boise State's schedule and see what they have left because if Boise State were to falter um, and Tulane were to falter, Army might have a chance at that last spot in the college football
At
playoff.
Wyoming and Oregon State.
So they've got Oregon State. That's a pretty good team.
No, that's the game after Wyoming.
Okay, so Boise State's got Wyoming and Oregon State left.
Yeah,
Okay.
two games left.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things that would have to happen, but number one, Army would have to beat Notre Dame on Saturday night, and we'll see what happens on that. Thank you, Richard. Sam, one thing I wanted to bring up was that Army and Tulane have clinched both being in the American Athletic Conference Championship game. The home team has not yet been determined. That will be determined by play over the next 2 weeks. And how does that matchup sound to you?
Well, the first off, I want to say I was disappointed in the way Navy played against Tulane on their senior day, and I'm not sure. Maybe it was something that was in the breakfast at the mess hall for them or something over at Bancroft Hall, but they literally laid down and didn't play. I truly expected them to give Tulane a run for the money. And I get it. Their starting quarterback went out. But when you want to talk about next man up, like their coach was talking about after the game, it doesn't mean next man up lays down and the rest of the team lays down and doesn't play. I mean, they only generated 135 yards of offense.
Wow.
And got shut out for the first time since they got shut out by Army in the Army-Navy game in 2020. So I'm not sure what is going on with Navy other than the fact that if they are that dependent on one player to have a season, then then they've been a paper tiger so far this season, for real. Now, hands off to Tulane. They came in focused. They knew it was Navy's senior day. They came in and they never took their foot off the accelerator pedal. They played a perfect game almost, and they looked good doing it. And their defense looks better than what their defense statistically actually adds up to be. But they earned it. You know, you don't go undefeated so far in conference play, and then you turn around and now you're qualified for the conference championship and say, that guy didn't really deserve to be in the conference championship. No, they've earned it. And they've got one more conference game, and it's against Memphis. And I think they're going to steamroll Memphis, honestly. It's at Tulane. Tulane's got a lot of momentum going on. And we're going to have a real challenge come December 1st, figuring out who's going to host the game, because when Army beats UTSA on November 30th and Tulane beats Memphis on November 30th, or actually they play on a Friday night, I think, then come December 1st, it's going to come down to both teams are tied for conference record. Which team is ranked higher, that's the team that's going to host according to the AAC rules. So we are not going to know until December 1st, literally, where the game is going to be played.
Sam, is that based on the AP poll, or is it based on the college football playoff ranking?
I'm not sure which one it's based on.
I heard it was the college football
It
playoff.
probably is. The college, now we've got the college football playoff poll, and that trumps the coaches poll and the AP poll. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, what are these other polls even for now if we're just going to go with the college football playoff poll? So, but Tulane is a really good team. And let me tell you something, in the Monken era, there is one team that has been Monken's Achilles heel, and it's Tulane. Monken has not beaten Tulane once. And when Willie Fritz was the coach, Willie Fritz was known for just giving Army serious drubbings, no matter where they played, at West Point, at Tulane, whatever. The closest game they ever played was in 2017 when Tulane scored on a 4th and goal with less than 2 minutes to go in a game and held on to win the game. And ever since then, Army's games against Tulane have just gotten progressively worse. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think Army and Tulane match up pretty well. But I will say that when it comes to speed and skill players, Tulane would represent the best level of competitive speed and skill players that they would have to defend against that I've seen play. They're pretty daggum good. And Mensa, who I'm not sure if that also means that he's a member of Mensa, but that's their quarterback. He is a really good quarterback, and he throws the ball outstanding. He makes good reads, and he runs the ball. So he is a serious dual threat quarterback. And that's the worst kind of quarterback for any team to have to defend against. And it'll be just as challenging for Army to defend against them. But you know what? Nate Woody, he'll have the defense ready. And I just hope that the game does get to be played at West Point so Army can be the home team for that. I'm going to do my best to be at the game regardless of where it's going to be played. Logistically, it's easier for me to go to the one in New Orleans if that's where it is. But either way, I expect it to be a good game. And like you were talking about, Army's got to win out. They've got to win out to get into college football, to have a chance at getting in the college football playoff. And I just want to, on the subject of college football playoff, I wanted to talk about something real quick that I think is kind of, as it looms large, it is kind of insulting to teams like Army that are undefeated right now, that they're not ranked higher. Because right now you've got SEC teams that have 2 losses that are ranked above Army for getting in the college football playoff. And let's not forget what happens every weekend in every Thanksgiving weekend every year. That's called the rivalry weekend. That's when all these big games, Georgia Tech, Alabama, Auburn, they play each other. Tennessee, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's having a good year this year. What's not to say that Vanderbilt doesn't knock off Tennessee? What's not to say Georgia Tech, who knocked off Miami, doesn't knock off Georgia? What's not to say that Auburn suddenly plays their best game and knocks off Alabama? Is the college football playoff still going to insist on shoving down our throat a 3-loss SEC team over Army? I mean, come on. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. And the more every week we go by and the college football playoff rankings come out, it's more of a diss on a service academy. And so we'll see where things shake out. I realize that there's still a lot of football to be played. Army has to win out. That is not in question. If Army loses one game between now and the college football playoff,
win over Sam,
they're out.
Notre Dame would be very impressive, and then
it would be, but it doesn't get them in. It doesn't get them in.
You have to win out. You have to be Texas.
They have to win out. If they lose just one game, including the AAC championship game, they're out. They're not going to go to the college football playoff. They have to win out.
Well, that is a very lofty goal. It's looking at the rankings, and what you're saying, Sam, is Mississippi's 8-2, they're 9th. Georgia's 8-2, they're 10th. Tennessee's 8-2, they're 11th. And then you get Boise State 9-1, SMU's 9-1, BYU's 9-1, Texas A&M is 8-2, Colorado 8-2, which is surprising because most of the polls have Colorado higher than 16th.
There's
And
only one reason that Boise State is ranked higher than Army, and that's because they had a 3-point loss to Oregon, who's number one. That's the only reason.
Well,
And
it's a strength that they have a strength of the schedule. So Boise State's going to have to win their 2 games. And who do you think they would play in the Mountain West Championship game, do you think?
my
Who's
God,
number 2?
I don't even know. I haven't even been paying attention to Mountain West, and you know, I don't even think about Air Force anymore.
Yeah, they're gone. So Army'd have to go over a bunch of teams, but the thought had been that the 12th team in the college football playoff would come from the group of 5,
Yeah.
whoever was the highest ranked. And Army's got a chance, and that's what makes it fun. Army has a chance. All they have to do is control their destiny by winning their games.
Yeah.
A lot harder than saying. But by the way, Tulane is ranked 20th. Army is ranked 19th in the college football playoff, just ahead of Arizona State. So right now, Army would get the home game, according to this.
Yeah. If it was determined right now, Army would host the game.
Well, obviously Tulane's 9-2. I don't know if that is, if one of the losses is non-conference for Tulane. The Army's got to beat San Antonio a week from Saturday at home, Thanksgiving weekend, and control their own destiny. And then would play the next Saturday against Tulane at Yankee Stadium. It'd be an exciting couple of games.
Yeah.
The one thing I have a concern about, Sam, is this is a lot of high caliber football for Army to play on consecutive weeks. And their depth is going to be tested. Because Notre Dame, they're going to take a lot of hits. And then they're going to play a Texas San Antonio team, same thing.
Yeah. UTSA is playing great football right now.
Yeah, so they're playing some good teams. They're going to play Tulane, and then they're going to get to Navy.
Yep.
And I just don't want to see what happened to Navy in 2016, where they got to the conference championship game. They lost to somebody. I think they lost to Memphis that year.
No, it was Temple.
Oh, it was Temple. Okay.
Yep.
And picked up a bunch of injuries.
They had a freak play where Navy had the ball, and on this freak play, both their quarterback and their starting slot back both got injured and were out for the season and couldn't play in the Army-Navy game.
Yeah.
And Will Worth was having a great year. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Let's go to Jack, and why don't you give us a detail on that Tulane Navy game and Air Force's game last week?
All right. Well, as you mentioned, Navy lost that one. It was a 35-0 shutout pitched by Tulane. Tulane running back Maki Hughes ran for 82 yards, had 2 touchdowns in the game. Their quarterback Darian Mensah threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for another one. Tulane outgained Navy. They had 359 yards total offense to Navy's 113. Also, Navy starting quarterback Blake Horvath left the game with a rib injury. Have to keep an eye on that. But as Sam was saying, this is the first time Navy has been shut out since the 15-0 shutout loss for them against Army in the Army-Navy game at Yankee Stadium in 2020. Navy has a bye week this weekend before visiting East Carolina on November 29th, day after Thanksgiving. So everybody's doing their Black Friday shopping. Navy's taking on East Carolina. Air Force, there was a shutout here, but in this case, Air Force won. It was a 28-0 shutout win for Air Force over Oregon State at Falcon Stadium. This is the last home game of the season for Air Force. And in terms of time of possession, Air Force had the ball 42 minutes to Oregon State's 18. Now, Oregon State going into the game was leading the country in time of possession with just over 35 minutes. but Oregon State was held to just 175 yards total offense. The Air Force's 409. Air Force quarterback sophomore Quentin Hayes had 194 yards total offense in the game, going 5 for 5 passing for 110 yards. And rushing, he had a pair of touchdown runs both in the first half. He rushed for 84 yards and 17 carries. Junior fullback Dylan Carson led the team with 97 yards rushing on 26 attempts. He had a 1 yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. Owen Allen also had a touchdown run, 2 yard touchdown run later in the fourth quarter. So it was the third win of the year for Air Force. And this weekend they are on the road at Nevada.
Okay, good for them. Okay, Chuck Donegan, tell us a little bit about what's been happening in the American Athletic Conference.
Well, Ken, quite a few games, quite a few different outcomes. Starting last Thursday, had a game between East Carolina and Tulsa. That was a close one, ending with a 38-31 East Carolina victory. And the next night was North Texas versus UTSA. That was another hard-fought contest, drawn or margin of victory for UTSA, who emerged victorious 48-27. Weekend had quite a few interesting contests. First up, South Florida, Charlotte. South Florida took 59-24. Elsewhere, Memphis really gave it to UAB with a 53-18 victory. Another close one between Florida Atlantic and Temple, ending with an 18-15 Temple victory. And not a good one for Navy, who fell big time to Tulane, 35-0.
Okay. Before we get to our lightning round, let's go through. Richard, what are 5 big games you're going to watch this week in addition to Army Notre Dame?
5 big games that I'll be watching, including the Army Navy game, will be
Notre Dame.
Army Notre Dame.
Sam.
We got about
Sam,
a month ago. We got a month ago.
Oh, like Sam, yeah, I heard you. Let's see. I'm gonna be watching number 2 Ohio State taking on in number 5 Indiana. Also, a little bit later on, there will be, let's see, number 3 Texas taking on Kentucky. Simultaneously going on, number 4 Penn State taking on Minnesota. That's 3. Let's see. The fourth game will be let's see. Fourth game will be number 7 Alabama taking on Oklahoma, and the fifth game will be, let's see, it will be USC and UCLA 10:30 on NBC.
Okay, UCLA USC, always a famous matchup. And Chuck, what's happening in the American Athletic Conference this week?
Well, Ken, got a few good games coming up. Friday, going to see a contest between Temple UTSA. That'll be 7 o'clock on ESPN2. And again, I would say have your DVRs ready to go this weekend because there's quite a few contests on Saturday. Obviously, Army Notre Dame. In addition to that, we've got Rice taking on UAB. That's 2 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Followed a little later by Charlotte versus Florida Atlantic. 3 o'clock also ESPN Plus. While Tulsa and South Florida do battle, that's 3:30 ESPN Plus, and East Carolina versus North Texas, also 3:30 ESPN Plus.
Okay, Chuck, and let's go to Jack. Jack, what's happening with Navy and Air Force? You said Navy's got a bye.
Yeah, Navy's got a bye week, and they are heading to East Carolina. That game is the day after Thanksgiving, November 29th. And then Air Force is on the road this weekend. On Saturday, they are at Nevada.
Okay. Hey, before we go to lightning round, I just want to ask Sam about Indiana. They've had a phenomenal season. First time they've been really competitive at the top of the Big Ten in memory. But then I read something that they really took advantage of the transfer portal to bring in players. And I guess that means they use the name, image, likeness opportunity pretty effectively. Any thoughts on Indiana's rise to prominence this year?
I think it's good for college football, to have a Big Ten team like Indiana. They're always known for being a basketball school, and now they actually are giving people fits on the gridiron and shaking up things in the Big Ten. And I think they play Ohio State this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's what Richard just was pointing
Yeah,
out.
so I mean
Games to
that
watch.
you normally would think Ohio State, Indiana. You're thinking, oh my God, what is this? Ohio State's homecoming. It's going to be a blowout and stuff like that. Not this year. Indiana. Remember, Indiana was one of two teams, Army being the other, for a while this season that had never trailed in a game. And they flinched on that the week before Army played North Texas. So Army actually won the sprint out of the gate to be the last team to ever trail in a game this season. But Indiana was doing a great job against some very solid competition in never trailing in a game and beating some typical Big Ten powerhouses. So I'm not, they're going to have, Indiana's definitely going to have their hands full with Ohio State. Indiana is where they are in the rankings and they've earned it. And I have no problem with that. And quite frankly, I would love to see them knock off Ohio State. I would love to see that happen.
Okay, that would be interesting. And by the way, in most of the projections, the 12th playoff spot would play at Ohio State in the first round of the college football playoff.
Well, Army needs a rematch of the 2017 game in the Horseshoe, if you recall that game.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Army was, it was close going into the second half, and Army had a couple of turnovers, and Ohio State
Yep.
just put on the afterburners. And
But that year, if you recall, the longest touchdown drive any team mounted on Ohio State the entire season was Army, a 99-yard drive for a touchdown.
that's right. You have good memory. What I remember about that game, besides the marching band doing the famous script to Ohio, which is phenomenal, was all along the outside of Ohio Stadium are tributes to veterans,
Mm-hmm.
to Ohio veterans. And what I found going there and also at Michigan is a lot of the ushers would wear veterans caps.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell there were a lot of veterans who were ushers at both places. And also across the street from, actually, you find in a lot of stadiums, the ROTC office is across the street from the football stadium. We've seen that in a few places, but definitely at Ohio State. And we got a chance to visit when we were out there. Okay, let's go to our lightning round and finish up. It's start with Jack. What's your thought on Army Notre Dame?
I think it should be a fun game. I looked up the odds on the game,
What
and
are the odds on the game?
it's Notre Dame are 14-point favorites.
14-point favorite. Okay, I
Yeah.
know that.
But I think this could be a fun game, and I'm going to go with an Army win, upset there, 24-21 Army.
Okay. Okay, Chuck, what do you have? What's your thought on the game?
Yeah. I think Army's going to pull off a pretty solid win this time around. I would say the final score is going to be 35-13.
35-13. You think Army's going to score 35 points on that Notre Dame defense?
Yep, I think it's a definite possibility.
Okay, and Army's defense going to hold Notre Dame to 13. Okay. Okay. Richard, what's your thought?
My thought on this game is going to be, I think, a close game. Army by a field goal. I'm going to go 27-24. Army game-winning field goal at the buzzer.
Okay, that's a plausible scenario. Could see that happening. Okay, and Sam, what's your thought?
Yeah, first thing I want to say, one thing I love about this time of year are these mid-season MAC games, man, that are on TV. Like Mac Tuesday, Mac Wednesday stuff. Like there's some great Mac games going on right now. I've got it on the TV here. You gotta love it. One of them was in a blizzard, so it's that time of year.
Yeah.
And so as far as this weekend's game, I can't tell you how much thought I've put more thought into this game than any game that Army has played this season. I literally have, because I've been trying to pick apart Notre Dame, and they're hard to pick apart because they are so good and they're so consistent. And that's that's what's hard to figure about them, is how consistently good they are across the board, both on offense and defense. So I'm going to go quickly just through some keys to the game before I tell you my score prediction. And I talked about the defense. On offense, here's what Army's offense has got to do. They've got to mount 3 long drives for touchdowns. And what I'm talking about is drives similar to that drive they mounted against North Texas, where they're taking 9 and 10 minutes off the clock. This is part of Army's defense because it keeps Notre Dame's offense off the field. Not only does Army need to do those 3 long drives, they need to finish them with touchdowns. So that accounts for 21 points. In addition to that, Notre Dame is going to be stacking the box big time, and they're going to be keying on Bryson Daly and Kanye Udo big time. And that's why I think this weekend we're going to see 3 players get more touches than we've been seeing them get in recent games. We're going to see Jake Rendina, we're going to see Hayden Reed, and we're going to see Tyrell Robinson getting a few more touches than we normally see him get. And the reason is because Army's going to be trying to exploit the perimeter based on Notre Dame's attempt to stuff the box. Notre Dame's going to rely on their defensive speed to cover the outside. If Army's perimeter blocking can just be one step ahead of Notre Dame, they can break some long touchdowns or they can break some long runs, i.e. what Noah Short was doing earlier this season. With that in mind, I think Army is actually going to do that. I think Army is actually going to spring 1 or 2 quick drives for touchdowns, in addition to 3 long drives. That accounts for 35 points. I'm glad Army's offense played sloppy against North Texas, because what's going to happen? They're not going to play sloppy against Notre Dame, and they're not going to commit any turnovers. They're not going to have any. They're going to limit their negative yardage plays. They're going to limit the drive-killing penalties. Against North Texas, there were so many holding calls that kept pushing Army back when they had good drives going, and they were really hard to overcome. Army had 2 great drives in the first half, late in the second quarter against North Texas. One of them was killed by the fact that they had a holding penalty. And then Bryson Daly got sacked for a big loss, and that killed the drive. And they're not going to be doing that against Notre Dame. So no drive-killing penalties. And I already mentioned dominate time of possession. But let's talk about special teams. They've got to play a perfect game. They've got to make the most of every opportunity they have. They've got to have tight kick coverage. Notre Dame's got some good kick returners. They've got to cover them. And they do not commit stupid penalties, whether it be on place kicking, whether it be on kickoffs, whether it be on kick returns. No penalties. Play a perfect game on special teams. And as for the team overall, you're playing Notre Dame. Don't flinch. Why do I say that?
Yeah,
because Notre Dame is going to have a play. There's going to be a play in this game where you think Notre Dame just sees the momentum. Don't flinch. Stick to your game plan. Stick to these basics. You can do it. I think Army can do it, and I think Army is going to do it. And based on my analysis right here that I have put a lot of time and thought into, I think the final score of this game is going to be 35-31 Army.
Okay, Army 35-31. And I got to get out of here because they're turning the lights off in the Army Hall of Fame area, which is adjacent to where the coach's office are. I know they're burning the midnight oil, studying film. But
they're probably listening to me and laughing. Like, listen to that guy. What a blowhard.
Well, Sam, I guess thank you. And my thought on the game is this is going to be tough. Army's got to keep the score down. They've got to get some 3 and outs on the Notre Dame offense, which is not going to be easy. And when they do get the ball, they've got to convert it into drives. Mm-hmm. I think, Sam, what I think you missed is I think Noah Short could be a factor in the game. We did a talk with him today, and I actually talked to him, and I said, there was a play against North Texas where he's doing an end around from the slot back position. He's got a head of steam and an open field ahead of him. And Bryson Daly pulls the ball back from him and runs it himself and gets clobbered. Just about 1 yard. I think as you said, they got to get the ball to the perimeter. Notre Dame will stack the box and stop Kanye
Mhm.
Udo and Jake Rendina and Bryson Daly. I don't think you want Bryson Daly running the ball 30 times.
No,
And
no.
he's got a lot of football to play the next month.
Yep.
And I don't think you can do that, running your quarterback 35 times.
No.
So we'll see what happens. But watch Noah Short to make some plays. And as I said, I was on a podcast. What was it? Richard Pot of Gold podcast. I said, watch for
Yeah,
watch
but Pot of Gold
Pot of
podcast.
Gold podcast. So I get it out. Watch for if Notre Dame stacks the box. Bryson Daly is really good at throwing the ball over the middle to Noah Short or to one of the other receivers,
Crazy
and
round.
making a big play. It's going to be
Yep.
tougher. Notre Dame's got some pretty good swift defensive backs and safeties, so
Yep.
we'll see what happens on that one. But I think if we can keep the score down, we got a good Army's got a good field goal kicker, and could make the difference. So I think the score is going to be something. I think for Army to have a chance to win, it's going to be 24-17. And so it's just pretty close to what Richard said.
Yep.
I think if I don't see Army scoring 35 points against the Notre Dame defense, and it's going to be an interesting game. But they got to do the long. They got to keep the ball on the ground and do a ball control game and have some success and tire out the Notre Dame defense if that's possible.
Yep.
And then they got a chance.
That's going to be the key. That's going to be the key. If they can dominate time of possession and be successful on their drives in the second half, you're going to see Notre Dame's defense start to get frustrated and wear out and be out of position, and that's where the big plays are going to come from. Noah Short pop on the perimeter, or a Kanye Udo counter that goes deep, goes long. So,
and I kind of see the start of the third quarter. If it's a close game at the half, which I think it could very well be, how each team comes out at the start of the third quarter. If either team gets a touchdown on a long drive, that's going to be very decisive. Is who comes out strong in the second half.
mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun. Yankee Stadium is a fun venue for football. It's got a tremendous sense of place. I have a great photo. I was at the Pinstripe Bowl last year covering it. I just sat under the goalpost taking photos and video most of the time. And it's a great picture of the goalpost with the facade of Yankee Stadium in the background. And so Chuck's going to be on the field for us and taking some of those photos for us.
Nice.
So any other thoughts before we wrap up? And they can turn the lights out here in the Army football building.
Now, this is just final thought, just for me, is that Army's season really begins now. Up until now, it's been getting ready for this stretch of games, and this is something that we talked about in some of our early huddles this season. That Army's season started out with some pretty what on paper looked like pretty easy games. But once we got into the mid stretch, we'd see what they were made of. And once we got into the final stretch, we were really going to see the season and the games on the line and the teams that were the toughest for Army to face. And it's about to start with Notre Dame. And then the other note that I did want to make mention of is yet another American Athletic Conference coach was given his walking papers this past weekend, that being FAU's coach. And so really has been a graveyard of coaches this year.
Who was that? At which school?
Florida Atlantic.
Florida Atlantic.
Oh, yeah. He was a coach who said that he's playing 50 transfers.
Yeah, well, he's not coaching anybody now.
Well, I think that's the challenge in that conference. And I think in the group of five is you get good players and they get poached by the Power Four schools.
That's at least three coaches of teams that Army's played and beaten this year that have been fired. Rice, ECU, FAU. There might be one other one in there that I'm forgetting about.
Yeah, it's too bad. I think it's what you're seeing is these schools invest a lot of money in football, and they between the schools and the alumni and donors, but it's challenging now to keep your players when you have them, much less attract them. So that's the new wave of college football is the impact of the transfer portal and NIL on the teams that are below, the power conference level. So, but it
Yep.
is good for Army. Army, the players have continuity. That's what the coach of Florida Atlantic said. He's playing a team where everybody on the team is a junior or a senior is playing, and they play together, come up through their system. And Coach Munkin said that, he doesn't get those players, doesn't get, he said that today that, Army has more players from Texas than almost anybody. But he said that none of those players on the Army roster were recruited by North Texas, which kind of surprised me. But they developed the players here at West Point, and with a lot of success. I think they're getting better athletes now too. That the program's become successful.
Yes.
There have been some good athletes that have come through the program. We have some NFL players,
Yep.
for sure. Well, anyway, I think they're going to turn the lights out. They're turning the lights out on the field, and they tried once to turn the lights out here in the Hall of Fame hall. But I want to thank everybody. Thank Richard Miller, and
Thank you,
Jasper
Ken.
Kirk, and Chuck
Thank you.
Donegan. Will
It's
be
a
with
pleasure,
us.
Ken.
And watch for John Tran. He'll have his article out tomorrow. And Sam Houston, thanks. And we hope you get your ticket to the Army Notre Dame game on Saturday. Somehow or other, I think you'll figure out a way.
Yep. As soon as we hang up here, I'm going to go back to doing my due diligence to figure this out.
Okay. Well,
All
thank
righty.
you all. And again, we always want to recognize our friends at the Special Operations Boyer Foundation who provide scholarships and mentoring to families in the special operations community who have lost a family member in military service. Do a great job, great charity. And so we will see many of you at Yankee Stadium in New York, in the Bronx, as Army takes on Notre Dame. It's also on the NBC network nationally and on Peacock, as they always remind us, so you can stream it. So big audience will watch the Army football team on Saturday. I think we all think it's going to be a very competitive game. So thank you. And Ken Kreitzer for CaMMVetsMedia. We cover cadets, midshipmen, the military, and veterans proudly since 2008. Thanks for watching.